Transmutation, brand new statement.
We are tight. Uh-oh, back to the lab again. Samurai. Watch me.
Over and over.
Stereo.
This is the clock zone.
Yes, again.
1, 2, 3, go!
It's hard to understate how significant Cartoon Network is as a network and a studio. Usually seen as a number 3 to the other American networks, Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, Cartoon Network ended up carving out a niche of its own, and ended up doing so sticking to the principle that cartoons are valued. If there was anything to show that animation deserved to be preserved and added onto, Cartoon Network was definitely the network you can go to, for the most part. To say that Cartoon Network has a checkered past is like saying that Adult Swim has a checkered past. It does. There are times where it does fall into the same mistakes as Nick and Disney, overly pandering to their audiences to the point of mockery, and canceling shows with a lot of promise for arbitrary reasons, with their parent company Warner Brothers hiding them away for similar arbitrary reasons. But there are times in which it falls on its own, like a teacher giving a curve to the class for not teaching half the stuff on the test, while little Johnny over there never studied any of the material in the first place. Its live-action audience never took off like it did with things like the Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, even if they did try. The same could be said when it comes down to what we're talking about today, their films. Not to say that they don't exist, but they never had the solid definitive lineup or notoriety that the other networks had, like the combination of Disney Channel's High School Musical series and Across the Second Dimension, or Nick's combination of Rango, Good Burger, or the SpongeBob SquarePants movies. But there are technically a lot of them. According to Wikipedia, 45 of them, and I'm gonna count down 41 of them to see which one is the best of the best. I'm gonna exclude 4 of them because they're based on adult cartoons, the ones that aired on the Adult Swim network, and I'd like to judge them separately, considering that I don't have the knowledge of them to comment properly on them, but other than that, I'm counting everything possible from the list that Wikipedia gave. This includes hour-long pilots, TV movies, a few theatrical films, some foreign films, and even some direct-to-video films. As long as they are produced by Cartoon Network on some level, we're counting them in here. It's a really unique lineup, and definitely varies wildly in quality. So let's strap in and see what we got here. This is my ranking of every Cartoon Network film ever.
Flintstones?
Some things that I'm glad that I didn't have to watch through were all the Spumco Yogi Bear features. In essence, the studio behind Ren and Stimpy decided to animate some Yogi Bear cartoons for Cartoon Network, and they were not a good watch. They tried to make them more adult, and in doing so it ended up being a very disgusting, poorly paced, awkward mess. So I'm glad that I don't have to watch it, but unfortunately, I had to watch Flintstones on the Rocks. This entire film is a numbingly agonizing mess of a movie, from the beginning of it to the end of it. I was so bored and annoyed watching this film that I had to rewatch some of the old Flintstones episodes, just to make sure that I wasn't misremembering the show, and surely enough, I wasn't. Fun fact, this was lost media for a good period of time, and honestly, yeah, I could see why. The first problem is that the film is super poorly paced. There are so many scenes that are just incredibly slow or stretched out, and the only reason they are is to reach the time that they need. You can tell it from the simple story. Fred and Wilma go vacationing with Barney and Betty to go to Acapulco, while a thief tries to steal their stuff. But while this plot can work for something like a 30-minute story in a regular show, this one takes ages, with so much nothing happening or scenes dragged to oblivion when everything is set in stone. A drawn-out vacation montage, a drawn-out driving scene, a drawn-out Fred Flintstone being sad montage, and good god. I used to be in a treadmill watching these movies, and the agonizing pain of my legs was more interesting to me than most of the pacing here. Now, this isn't the only thing wrong with the writing, but that'll lead to problem too. Despite how much the show really tries to recapture the magic of the original in certain aspects, the world that they tell the film in is really off. It feels unusually cruel, like when Fred's boss calls him in just to say that Barney is getting his promotion, or when Fred and Wilma finally face some resolution, Barney and Betty get into a marriage rut because husbands and wives fighting is so funny, guys. The biggest problem is Fred Flintstone. You see, the film is called On the Rocks because the plot is the result of a failed marriage counseling, and honestly, Fred's behavior makes it all understandable. Fred is such a jerk. From beginning to end, he does nothing but make him the worst version of his character. All he does is ignore and belittle everyone around him and be an ignorant jerk, and not even in an entertaining way. The first part of this film is Fred Flintstone doing everything he can to be a jerk to his wife and ignoring therapy. He flirts with a woman who isn't his wife, while he's driving around in the car with her sitting right next to him. He goes to Mexico and just decides to be racist, I guess. and his wife tries to get Fred's attention and look good for him, and he ignores her. It's the trope played as straight as possible. He's the idiot, ignorant husband taken to its highest extreme. They give him some moments at the end where he reflects on his actions, but that's it. And it was way out of character for what he was like, as well as being too little too late. And that's the whole movie. Just Fred being a jerk and the absolutely terrible pacing. Now, is there anything I like? A few things. The score is okay, the art and the style is relatively faithful, and the ending where Fred realizes how he's taken Wilma for granted is okay, even if again, it's too little too late, but that's it. There's nothing even ironically enjoyable with this one. Watch A Man Named Flintstone if you want a better film. Heck, watch the first Flintstones live-action movie if you want a better film. I have nothing else to say. Unless you're a really big Flintstones fan, then just skip it. Even if you're just bored, still skip it. Even if you're morbidly curious, just the tiniest bit curious, still skip it. I would actually rather watch Dinosaur, and that's saying something.
I like trains.
Oh, Reanimated. What is there to say about Reanimated? Cartoon Network's first foray into live action turned into a continual punching bag compared to the other two networks. When I started this list, I just knew that this would be somewhere near the bottom, if not the lowest ranked. Then I saw Flintstone on the rocks, and I had a change of conscience. Alright, I guess I'll sum up the pot then. So, Jimmy was an average kid who no one understands. He never gets the girl, and Craig keeps giving him demands. Stress and mess from his pal Best, and gets hit with the train. And then he wakes up and cartoons erupt, all from inside his brain. And now he runs the company, and the son of the company's founder is jealous and wants to steal his brain. His best friend and love interest don't like him, and everything gets saved by the end. Sorry, I can't do the parody for every part of this. I don't feel like it. Every single element of this has something sorta wrong with it, in the sense where separately some of these things range from decent to unbearable, but combined they make an ugly Sunday of disaster. The actors are fine. A lot of them actually do a good job when it comes to things like inflection and delivering their lines, at least for as long as I can tolerate them, because good god, the characters suck. From having one of the most annoying fathers in Cartoon Network history, to a girl whose only personality is cartoons and has a brother, to Craig, the worst best friend character ever. Someone who's only trying to be cool and will do anything to fit in with being cool, including ditching his friend Jimmy wherever he can until the movie decides that we need to sympathize with Jimmy doing the same thing. Jimmy gets hit by a train and then has to have brain surgery, and as soon as he tells Craig about it, he's only concerned that he got ditched instead of caring about his friend. Even the better characters have annoying writing gimmicks or weird decisions made with them, like having Jimmy, a generally okay character, be forced into being a pushover who spends the entire act stuttering like an idiot, or having Sunny Appleday, a generally hammy villain who tries to be as cartoony as possible, be objectively in the right. In a world where brain transplants exist, and Sunny is forced into the role of being the company head, despite not having any of the know-how or imagination that his father had, you'd think that they would try to transfer a brain around to get Milt's mind back, especially when they decided to transfer the brain to a random child instead. Did I mention that the plot sucks? Because the conflict of this movie is him trying to balance being the CEO of an animation company while going to school and having the brain of Walt Disney, one who hallucinated cartoons and ate paint in his life. And that's only the scratching surface of the weird convoluted questions you could run into for this plot trying so hard to be as basic as possible but tripping on every hurdle. Even the main draw to this film, the animated characters, are either full of stereotypes or just try to manipulate Jimmy the same way that he gets manipulated by everyone else. While they aren't there too much, the presence that they do have feels like a horror movie. They constantly torture and manipulate Jimmy, to the point where even if you see it as charming and goofy in some places, by the end of the movie it really feels like Jimmy is suffering from schizophrenia. But even if you don't take the story seriously at all, they're still not funny. I would think getting Tom Kenny and Paul Reubens to be in this movie meant that you were trying to make it funny or something, and yeah, it kinda is on some level, but not nearly enough to elevate the movie the same way that Roger Rabbit or Son of Zorn would. While I did chuckle at a few of the jokes, most of them have some weird timing and just don't make sense. Mostly every repeating gag is either annoying or off-putting to a degree where you can laugh at them, only if you decide to host a party with the gang and get a few drinks in. And finally, the editing is really confusing. On a technical level, a lot of this stuff is not doing a good job showing any effort they put into the production. Things like the animated characters being poorly integrated into the world, or lacking the focus to make certain jokes work, or jump cutting in places where they clearly put a lot of effort. It's all just a huge train wreck. But in the train wreck, you could find an ironic treasure. It doesn't try to take itself as something too serious, as a serious narrative, and more so tries to show how goofy they can make a live-action Cartoon Network program. And even if it failed horribly, I still think it's a fun ride all the way through. A weird way to end things in this segment, but hey, I'll take it over a dance party ending crossed over with a murder-suicide. Yes, that's really how it ends.
Nanomachine, son.
Ben 10 Alien Swarm is the second live-action Ben 10 movie. Yes, there are two. It definitely exists and has all the characters that you love. That's pretty much it, though. Okay, the story is that Alana, who is to Ben as Tara is to Beast Boy, has a dad, who is taken over by an alien microchip, and so she turns to the grown-up Ben 10 to ask for their help in stopping this alien from taking over the world. To be blunt, I think the only good thing about this one are the characters. Yeah, they aren't too badly written, and I definitely do appreciate the chemistry here a lot, especially the person who played Kevin, because he understood the assignment and did his absolute goal to take Kevin 11 up to a 12. The other actors aren't too bad in all honesty either, but boy does a lot of the dialogue just end up as exposition. I sorta get it for some new people, but it's just sorta tiring after it's just the entire movie. Alien tech this, plumber tech that. Remember that one time when this one person did that? The other problem is that, like another Ben 10 movie, Ben rarely uses his Omnitrix for anything, so we only get a few alien transformations from him. There are a few scenes with the aliens interspersed here and there, and the action that they actually have is admittedly pretty good, but it pales in comparison to the yapping. I think the vibe could sometimes be a bit intimidating. A town under control by the alien microchips ended up being pretty interesting, but you can only do so much when it just doesn't have the follow through with some of this stuff, only getting somewhat interesting by the very end. I really can't say anything else about this boring mess. I'm admittedly not a huge fan of Ben 10, but every other Ben 10 movie has done something interesting for me to be interested in the world that they've made or the story that they're trying to tell. Heck, at least Race Against Time, despite its worst acting, had some great comedy, neat suspense, and a lot of interesting moments. But this is just sort of existing. If you care about the Ben 10 brand, then watch it once and never again. But for me, I'm just waiting for anything else other than this live-action malarkey.
I did it, Morty! I killed the versions of us that were in Space Jam!
Do I really need to bother talking about this one? Like, will anyone ever actually care about this film? Teen Titans Go See Space Jam. What's the plot? Teen Titans Go See Space Jam. What do they actually do? Teen Titans Go See Space Jam. What are the positives and negatives? See Space Jam. Teen Titans Go... Literally, all they do is watch Space Jam and comment on it. Is it good? I don't know. Is Space Jam good? Because there's nothing else here, except that the Titans sometimes comment on it. Some are better, some are worse, but most are pointless. Speaking of, we get like a good chunk of the film missing, but at least the better scenes are here. Hooray. But yeah, I don't think the Teen Titans are bad in this, but for the love of God, this is all I can say about Jam. Go see Teen Titans Space, and that's all I'm going to say about Space Jam. Teen Titans Space Ghost. If you want a version of Space Jam with a butt counter, then sure, go for it I guess. Next.
You guys do so many goddamn references. I don't.
Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo The Mystery Begins is a live-action Scooby-Doo movie, but it's not like those other live-action Scooby-Doo movies. This one sucks. Okay, well to be fair, this movie didn't have the big budget that the other two live-action films had, but hey, I still had hope that maybe there's more to this one. This movie shows the origin of the Scooby-Doo gang and how they all ended up joining together as mysterious ghost hauntings have been causing trouble around the area. You get your typical scenes that you'd expect. How Shaggy met Scooby, how he met the rest of the gang, what caused him to hunt for mysteries, the origin of Scooby's snacks, all the things that you'd expect. But the film is just so generic and cliche, with a lot of the charm from the show completely gone. Like, it definitely tries to have some charm and fun here and there, and sometimes it genuinely succeeds, but most of the time it just doesn't. I think the most notable thing is that Scooby is not fun at all. The titular character, the animation on him doesn't look good at all, especially compared to the other live action film, and every single scene with him is either cringy, unfunny CGI, or just his relationship with Shaggy from Scoob. Oh, and that one scene where he looks like he's about to make them all pay. The entire conflict and mystery is convoluted in so many ways, from the use of real ghosts to get a stamp, no joke, that's the motivation here, to the red herrings that are only red herring because they said one bad thing once about them, to how they actually end up in detention because the bus driver didn't think to put his feet on the brake and would rather have these kids in detention. The entire plot of this film just feels like an afterthought. There's a lot of things where I don't think that I'll remember them at all, but there are a few things that I did end up liking. I like the chemistry between the gang. It's actually not too bad. Their acting really helps carry the relationship, and some of the scenes that they have together are kinda charming and fun. And Shaggy's arc of getting friends, while generic, is kinda neat as well. Fred, Velma, and Daphne are actually kinda alright in this one. They have some generally charming moments, and it makes their characters interesting enough to the point where I'm actually down with them being a gang. There's also a few jokes here and there that, admittedly, I think are kinda funny, like Shaggy dressing up in a trash can, or Velma making a nuclear weapon. But honestly, in so many ways, it's just a nothing movie. Did you guys know this is the highest viewed premiere in the channel's history, beating out the premiere of Star Wars The Clone Wars? Yeah, this one. Before the legendary comic idol Stan Lee passed away, he ended up pairing with a company named Graphic India to make an Indian superhero. His name was Chakra the Invincible, a hero that was able to use special powers through unlocking chakra within him. Think Rock Lee's Gates of Healing, but Indian. And when I heard that there was a movie based on this comic, I was excited to see what it was even about. But finding this thing was a nightmare. Looking it up, there was basically nothing on it except a basic plot synopsis and the cover of the comic. No pictures from the actual movie or anything like that, so I decided to look a little harder. And harder I looked until I found Chakra the Invincible and the Mystery of Mighty Girl, which is apparently a movie that exists. I thought that it was the actual movie, but looking into the release dates of it showed me that it was actually a special that aired with the TV show's run. If you were wondering, it was awful. Some of the worst animating, editing, and sound design of this entire retrospective, and I honestly would have put it under Flintstones on the Rocks. But then I found the actual movie. Or did I? Heck, I'm still doubting myself today. But regardless, I can understand why they used a comic cover as the one behind this one. The plot revolves around a special suit that gives our hero, Raju, the ability to save people with the power of his chakras. Facing a villain with a similar backstory. It's essentially what you'd expect from a Spider-Man story, actually sharing a lot in common with the first Spider-Verse, other than the alternate world concept. Raju is working with a scientist and ended up getting these powers supernaturally. A relative that he was close to dies, and by defeating the villain at the end, he learns what it truly means to be a hero. A lot of the story is kinda charming, even if it is a bit average, and I do truly enjoy it a lot. Wait a second, what's that? I haven't shown you what the actual animation looks like? Oh, I was just showing screenshots from the comics. Silly me. Well, here you go. I hope this is what you wanted. Oh, who am I kidding me? This is garbage. In a weird move, the movie is just the first 8 issues of Chakra the Invincible, but given mouth movements. Like it's trying to be as low budget as possible. It is bar none the worst out of all of these when it comes to animation. While the characters and setting and everything about this one is pretty neat, from the intense villains, the dramatic states, and the enticing paneling, I'm never going to watch this again. Ever. I don't know if I would say that it does the source material dirty, because they're definitely faithful, so faithful that they didn't change a single thing. It's about as faithful as a man who loses his wife and digs up her corpse to be with her again. It feels so incredibly low effort, and it does so trying to hype up this series with an icon like Stan Lee attached to it, but in the end, it's just a worthless reshowing of a work that was done before, that tries to pass itself off as something new, by taking the original 6 out of 10 work, and somehow making it worse than before, by not putting in any effort. What do you mean they sold NFTs of him after Stan Lee passed away?
Please let this be a normal field trip.
My Gym Partner's a Monkey is a show. It was definitely existing back in the day, and this sure is a movie based on it. Look, I never really hated the show all too much. Could I remember anything positive about it ever? No. But I've been surprised with other movies like this in this list, so I thought that maybe I could give this a try. And like, all that I can come out of it with is that it exists. The plot is that the crew of the show are going on a big field trip, and on their way they crash into a park, calamity ensues. Every single note that I have about this one is about how long and aggravating this film is to actually watch through. Like, there are a few subplots that come from this movie, the teacher's trying to get everything working, the side characters trying to survive in the jungle, and Adam and Jake being inducted to Chipmunk royalty. Wait, what? I don't know, it was kind of fun. But that's not really a sentiment that I have for the rest of the stories, because they all just sorta happen, and nothing really entertaining happens as a result of it. Or if it does, it takes a season of a Western animated TV show to get there. And heck, that only happens after getting halfway through the movie, as the main driving to the field plot is just really draggy and annoying. To be fair, it does have jokes to laugh at, and a few character dynamics are interesting, but other than that, I have no thoughts on this movie, other than to skip it and just move on with your life. It's weird because the set of characters seems like it would be engaging for a movie like this, but in the end it's just a bus headed to nowhere.
What is this? A crossover episode?
Teen Titans Go and DC Superhero Girls Multiverse in the Mayhem, what? Teen Titans Go and DC Superhero Girls Mayhem in the Multiverse is the equivalent of asking someone to make a literary analysis, analyzing the difference in how certain writers can use obsession as a theme, and bringing up Moby Dick as a source for one bit, and then interspersing that analysis with stuff from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Cabin Fever as a source too. This is to say that a lot of it is alright, but unfortunately a lot of things drag it down, most notably the Cabin Fever parts. Lex Luthor gets his hand on an ancient cursed Kryptonian amulet, which gives him the power to conquer the world. But unbeknownst to him, the cursed amulet belongs to Sithona, the Kryptonian goddess of darkness, who wants to use Supergirl's body for her own and regain her life. It's up to the DC Superhero Girls to stop her and save the day. What's that? Where are the Teen Titans in this? Don't worry, we'll get to that in a bit. Now, I'm not gonna lie about the quality of this film. It's super predictable. You know everything that will happen to these characters 10 minutes before it happens. Like, I don't think there was any plot point that didn't make me roll my eyes and think, oh geez, never seen that before. Like, I know there are 1,000 places that compare this show to MLP, see their treatment of men in this movie being like Dragon Quest personified, but I didn't think that we'd have a third act breakup as predictable as the MLP movie, meaning that it just comes out of nowhere given the history of these characters. Yeah, we have to do it because it's an animated movie. It definitely justifies itself better, but the fact that it was used made me so annoyed. The action and conflict overall is fine. The humor is fine. I don't think there was anything that I particularly hated, but a lot of the action, conflict, and humor is just alright. It's fine. There are a few things that I thought were neat though. Like, there's a few moments that are pretty meaningful. Things like Harley finally joining Batgirl after seeing how crazy the villains are. An arc of the show that gets fulfilled here. The same goes for seeing Supergirl's motivation higher after her talk with Superman, or Zatanna learning to deal with dark thoughts. It's all sort of expected, and not a lot is done to make them stand out. Superman's stuff was after he spent basically most of the show belittling Supergirl, and Zatanna's stuff only came after 1, if not 2 episodes focused on this plot point, but it's still decent. By far though, my favorite scene is when Wonder Woman escapes and decides to leave the group to rejoin her mother. She feels like she's too much of a failure to justify her choices, and her mom gives her a really touching speech about how she hasn't taught her how to deal with failure, that failure is natural and she should learn how to deal with it. It's all really nice, and legitimately one of the scenes in this movie that I come back to, especially since it ties back to the beginning of the show, and Wonder Woman's justification for forming the superhero girls team in the first place. But silly me, I forgot about the Teen Titans. They're here to sit on a couch and talk about the fact that they're watching a crossover, waiting for the crossover bit, and then they show up for 5 minutes and do nothing, except for that one heart-to-heart conversation with Zatanna and Raven, and then complain about it. That's all they do. It's so weird, especially when you see how many crossovers Teen Titans Go has had in the past, and think about how weird it is that they utilized them for so little. Heck, even crossovers it did before with the DC Superhero Girls were so much better. As for this movie, it feels like the finale to DC Superhero Girls, with an iconic Attack the Critic episode pasted on top of it, and nobody wants that. Fire Breather is apparently a movie based on a comic that for some reason I never saw. Maybe it was the time that it came out, where Cartoon Network relied on their fan bases for either their live action content or serious shows like Ben 10, with them trying to find any other show to fill something like that in, but then canceling them for a lack of merch or something weird like that. We get tales like Generator Rex, the Thundercats reboot, and Symbiotic Titan, which, while they are good shows in their own right, they never really lasted. And Fire Breather just felt like an extent of that. Duncan, a son of a fire-breathing draconic monster, needs to hide his monster side when going to a brand new high school, only for his dad to announce Duncan as the true American dragon, king of the kaijus. As a result, now Duncan has to fight off the supernatural beasts that are trying to go after humanity, and save the innocent ones. At the same time, he's a misunderstood, angsty teenager who feels cursed by his father, and all he wants to do is find his own honor by using his birthright for good. Now, on the surface, everything seems fine. The movie has a lot of, I don't know if I'd call it good, but definitely interesting action, on both the choreography and an execution level. It's strange that nobody really cares about how athletic he is, but honestly it's still pretty fun to see. I also think that the school life / monster hunting conflict that Duncan has here is serviceable. Definitely not the worst idea, but good lord, this is just so flavorless, and I think it can attribute the plot to that. Picture this. You make a piece of media where you're putting a supernatural kid in a typical high school. What could you imagine? Oh, bullying? Getting the girl for prom? A prom or talent show where the supernatural threat they've been dealing with comes to a head? Well, it's a good thing Fire Breather does all these things, but barely makes them interesting. And generic plot aside, there's a lot that you can pin on this mellow cast of characters. While we get a nicer version of this character in the second half, Duncan is basically your average angsty hero with a heart of gold for most of the movie, and beyond helping one kaiju and doing all the stereotypical school stuff, he barely does anything that makes him unique or interesting. Then there's of course the girl that he likes, the boys that he doesn't, and the friend who's a girl but not a girlfriend. Come on, Mom. Remember when I showed those images of those two other Dante Bosco characters? Well, believe it or not, they do have him in this movie, but he doesn't voice Duncan. Instead, he voices a kid named Kenny Rogers, who they make into an unbelievably whiny incel, who spends the entire movie simping over a girl he has no romantic connection with, or trying to find any reason to throw self-pity on himself. But honestly, I think it's kind of funny. Like, the underlying problem is that literally everyone in this movie, with the exception of maybe the mom, is an angsty asshole for one reason or another, which makes it all not fun. But Kenny's pity and overall pathetic nature is kinda comical. He goes so far into being a miserable scene kid that it wraps around to being hilarious. A lot like the unintentional hilarity of Rory from Yeek. Aside from that, there are a few smaller things that I like. I think that while a lot of these scenes are finicky, a lot of the action is super well animated, and it has a lot of intense action scenes. Like, by the end they get into a giant kaiju battle, with so many different people joining in this fight, and some of the moments are kinda neat from a sentimental point of view. Like the bully going through a subtle sympathetic arc in the background, or seeing the girl that Duncan likes slowly building up to liking him. I think it's actually kinda cool. I'd definitely like it more if it was with characters that I actually cared about, or ones with more dimensions than just jerk. But yeah, it really is the lackluster characters that drag most of this movie down. But if you really want to watch some cool action, neat drama, and CGI that exists, I think you can give this one a watch. But I definitely won't again.
Time, huh? Thanks for the tip.
Woohoo! Another live action film! Yay! Okay, this one isn't quite as bad as the other ones I've covered so far, but it still has a few of the same problems as the others. In any case, the plot of this movie is that Ben is trying to fit in after a summer with Gwen and Max, and is finding it all a bit boring, until they're confronted by a time alien that believes that he could turn Ben into one of him, in order to destroy the plumbers and become the person who influences Ben to become evil and stuff like that. You know, time travel. Now, despite this movie ranking actually really low on this list, there's actually a lot that I like about it conceptually. Despite being live action, it actually sort of captures a bit of the heart and humor of the original in a lot of ways. Seeing things like Ben getting back at his bullies as gray matter, and seeing him try to regain his popularity with parents who just don't understand. It's all really cheesy and expected, but nice. The alien stuff too. While I think it definitely has a ways to go in terms of actually looking good, they do the best with what they have, and it's nice in a lot of ways too. Heck, even the dramatic and intense scenes actually hit quite well and end up being pretty spooky or intense action-wise. Like that one scene where the principal talks to Ben and then has one more thing to say, only for it to be interrupted by time aliens. Peak storytelling. It surprisingly utilizes the alien transformation super well, and I think that it's filled with adequate action. That's all well and good and such, but then there's the other plot. The stuff with the plumbers and this time alien thing are pretty great. Like, having so many people in the neighborhood being plumbers who run this entire underground society is actually really neat. I also think that the main villain is a really imposing threat. The villain controls time and uses it to mess with Ben in a lot of ways, and I feel like a lot of fantastic scenes come from him interacting with everyone else. Unfortunately, Ben's school drama gets a lot of focus, and a lot of it is awkward and weird. Not all of it, but a big chunk of it just feels awkward and stilted. Stuff like the cheerleaders being there, and the bullies being there. Though I will admit, the bullies definitely did have the best acting in the whole thing. And then there's the introduction to Ben's hippie parents, which were awkward and weird. Like, they talk about alternative lifestyle stuff and hemp products so much that it feels like a bunch of strongman characters in a conservative cartoon. Overall, though, the acting, while great in some places, ends up being really hokey in others. But if you want some Ben 10 action with Ben trying to live through a normal life while dealing with alien shenanigans, there's definitely worse options to choose in this one. And for what it's worth, I think it put an okay step forward with this kind of stuff.
Oh, there's one more thing.
Scooby-Doo Curse of the Lake Monster is something that I remember seeing, but only as like a flashbang of a memory. In the sense that I remember a scene or two from it, but that's all. It's weird because it's the only film that I know of that I have a flashbang memory of. Well, that and the Donkey Kong Country cartoon, so you know it's peak. Curse of the Lake Monster is pretty self-explanatory plot-wise. There's a lake monster, it curses the place, and now the Scooby Gang is on the case. The mystery itself is definitely an obvious twist that everyone saw coming, but sort of like a Columbo episode, it's about the how more than the who. And I think that it does deliver on that aspect, as the lore and the mystery behind why all of this is happening is something that the film puts focus on. The cast is pretty good overall. I did talk about it very much with the first movie, and I think that a lot of the roles and jokes that they give him end up working in terms of drama or comedy. Though there are two big flaws with the cast, and while one I'll get to in a bit, the other is that Scooby is barely in this thing. To be fair, that's a positive overall, because the CG, while debatably the quality might be worse, they just do the same jokes they did with Scooby in the first one, though not as bad. In any case, I think that the villain is also something I like. A pretty neat villain with a fun motive. And while it is obvious when you see the beginning, seeing the transformation going overall is definitely suspenseful and interesting. A bit of dramatic irony for the crew. So it all seems nice. A Scooby-Doo pseudo-mystery with great characters and a neat villain. But then there's all the relationship drama. While we get a lot of great interactions with the entire cast, most of it is Shaggy and Velma getting together, and Fred and Daphne trying to figure out what the relationship actually is. While it's fine for a B-plot maybe, it really does fill up a lot of the movie, especially in areas where it just doesn't fit. Overall though, besides the romance stuff, it's actually not that bad. It seems like everyone had their fun doing this one, especially with their music videos. And I think that the movie itself, while it isn't a regular Scooby-Doo adventure, it does get a regular Scooby-Doo score.
Look at them! They're doing that thing where they're good at being superheroes!
You know, this entire list had me fall into so many surprises here and there, but the biggest surprise to me is the fact that I didn't put this movie at the bottom 10. I hated this movie when I first saw it. Everything leading up to this movie was like the worst possible omen. From the post-credits message in Teen Titans Go to the Movies, to people like the VAs claiming that it was for a possible season 6 of the original show, to the inevitable reveal of this, and knowing the history of Go, when it comes to the OG, with its Attack the Critics episodes. Some people had hope for this one. I was one of them. And then it came out, and then it sucked. But let's take this one step at a time. The Go Titans are summoned to fight the OG Titans in a battle to decide who's the best, only to find out that it was a plot orchestrated by the Trigons of Go and the OG, to take Raven's powers and rule the multiverse. Now, there are a few positives here and there. First off, the action is actually not too bad. Like, the average of good action scenes in this movie is a bit better than Teen Titans Go to the Movies, to a great extent. And a lot of it does have to do with the surprisingly great melding of art styles of Go and the OG. Now, it's absolutely not perfect, but when it works, it does work. I'll also say that the Raven stuff between Go and the OG is a pretty satisfying emotional connection. Not that it's as good as when Raven faced Trigon for the first time, but it's still neat to see. You get to see the OG Raven actually able to help out the Go Raven, and it does feel like an evolution to her character, to the point where she can actually help Go Raven out. The film is also kinda sort of funny. They have a good few jokes here that were surprisingly funny. The song We Are Teen Titans is a great 90s throwback, and I definitely had fun with that one. Alright, that's about as nice as I can be. This film has two big problems, and they overlap a lot. The first is that, aside from a few circumstances, Go does not mesh well with OG, and vice versa. It feels like they want to use this special as an excuse to try and ease tension between Go and the OG fans. But they write the Go team as goofy, silly jokesters, and the OG as super serious heroes. We get a few silly moments from the OG, and a few serious moments from Go, but a lot of them do seem out of character. We barely get any OG Beast Boy jokes. I think that says it all. I think the one time where it actually worked is when they went after Santa. It's such a bizarrely perfect fit, and one that shows how serious the Go Titans could be, compared to the OG ones. But in every other circumstance, it's just like Return of Slade and Let's Get Serious again. Episodes specifically meant to take the piss out of critics, or shamefully kiss up to the OG show. And it feels like that for basically half the writing. Either that, or it feels like that one episode of the original Teen Titans, Fractured, which is just a silly episode filled with pretty much nothing. And you feel both of these combining with their treks into multiple universes, or the scenes where they just say Whirligog over and over, and by the end it's just like, who cares? My second is that both Robins here suck. Go's Robin, of course, gets karma for being overconfident, but it's mostly just the same sort of stuff that you'd see from the worst Teen Titans Go episodes, where he gets consistently beat up for no real good reason. But surprisingly, I hate OG Robin a lot more in this movie. He's absolutely not like how he was in the OG show, and instead is just weirdly dismissive of everyone. He's so obsessed with being a good leader and being broody that he comes off as a tryhard. Not to mention, in the plot, Go Robin actually helps out a lot more directly. While the OG Robin is able to defeat Santa, Go Robin is able to get them there in the first place, and end up destroying the Whirligog and trapping Trigon in the zombie dimension. And yet, by the end, OG still treats Go like a child, and they all just praise him like he's such a good leader. I think that overall, with a combination of these elements, you just end up with a movie that makes you feel nothing. There's definitely some care in this crossover, but not too much in the writing, unfortunately. And while there are neat scenes and funny moments in a vacuum, overall, this one is a mess.
Omelette de fromage. Omelette de fromage.
Dexter's Lab Ego Trip is the first one of these movies, and, well, it sure is a movie. While I was never the biggest fan of Dexter's Lab growing up, I came out of this one feeling relatively neutral, all things considered. In this movie, Dexter gets visited by enemies from the future, who try to ruin the past. And so Dexter goes into the future, seeing how he ended up making the world a brighter place, only for a villain of his childhood, Mandark, to ruin the future that he made, and now it's up to Dexter to stop it and return to the past. For those of you wondering, this came out 8 years before Meet the Robinsons, but it does look like it a lot. Not really holding it against this movie, as they both probably had similar inspirations, but it's kinda neat to see another version of it. In any case, there's a lot of fun here. The main highlight of the movie is Dexter. His character is just so entertaining and endearing by just having him be his arrogant yet genius self. Him destroying the future robots and only setting off the plot so that he doesn't have to deal with any more shenanigans is really funny. And seeing him interact and encourage future versions of himself is really neat. In fact, all the versions of him are pretty fun. Having this sort of cowardly teenager version of Dexter, this old accomplished version of Dexter, and this super buff hero version of Dexter. They're all such fun characters, and that's a really neat thing. And it's definitely a bold move by having all the main characters be Dexter, but it ended up paying off. The only thing is that his voice is just sort of grating. Especially with the teenager version of himself, it was just incredibly obnoxious. Maybe it could work for an episode or so, I remember it doing so in the show, but the entire movie it just felt unpleasant. Other than that, I liked all the visits to the future. They were really neat and had a bit of entertainment here and there, like with the enforcement of no technology in the doomed future, and the vibe of the good future. And the jokes? They were alright, but there's nothing that I'd say was spectacular except for the ending, which definitely made me laugh. Especially because the pacing is so slow to some of these jokes. It was to the point where I definitely thought that watching an episode of the show would have been better, but bottom line, yeah, it was okay. Not that good, but not that bad. I really don't have any thoughts on it one way or the other though.
Well, it's a little bit dangerous, my friend.
Billy and Mandy was one of those shows that I remember watching all the time, but I only had vague memories of, this is kinda neat, and that is kinda stupid. It was to the point of kid me saying, I'm too intelligent for this show. But while I still feel a bit of that to an extent rewatching a few episodes, and 3 of these movies, I've definitely grown a liking to the series, and I remember everything that I like about them, as well as everything I don't like about them. In any case, we move on to Billy and Mandy's Big Boogie Adventure. The plot is that Boogeyman gets Grimm's rights as the Grim Reaper taken away from him, and both he and Boogeyman have to sail the 7 seas to get to Horror's hand and gain their reputations as the most horrifying of creatures. To cut to the chase on this one, while everything here is of good quality, there's a few things that drag him down. The atmosphere is amazing as always, and it stays as funny as it always is. If you're here for jokes, I can definitely see that you will get your fill, like when they go up against the blind Cyclops, or when Billy and Mandy robots are sent to replace their human counterparts, or when Billy sings a song to distract Boogie's crew. The problem is that all these jokes sort of overstay their welcome, and after seeing Billy's dad deal with Robot Billy for the 5th time, or by the end of Billy's song, they just sort of get dull. Not every joke is like this. Seeing who they got to replace the Grim Reaper was also a good laugh. And also seeing Mandy's greatest fear and Boogie's final defeat. They were all pretty good. But it kind of falls apart when the plot is just not that fun. They don't actually do much in this story that really makes for an interesting watch. Grim gets insulted on so much at the beginning, and while some of it is funny, a lot of it is just kind of depressing. And other than the jokes that take forever to actually go through, there's honestly not much here to talk about. Not too many great character moments individually, or, well, not much to truly enjoy, period. It does feel like a shame, but I think in general, the Billy and Mandy vibe elevates it to a really near 6 out of 10. Definitely not one of their best feet forward, but still kinda nice.
I can taste the Himalayas!
Chill Out Scooby-Doo is the first Scooby-Doo movie on this list, and apparently the most normal one. This Scooby-Doo mystery is about Shaggy and Scooby going to the Himalayas and solving the mystery of a Yeti that invades the area. I mean, what else do you want me to say? Honestly, this is all you need for a Scooby-Doo story, because you know what a Scooby-Doo story has. Some villains or red herrings that distract from the mystery, Shaggy and Scooby acting crazy and wacky while the rest of the gang look for clues, blah blah meddling kids, blah blah blah. But, while I can't say this is one of their better adventures, it was pretty alright all things considered. There's this one guy who apparently has continuity with another Scooby-Doo adventure, and he's pretty alright, I guess. I actually didn't hate him as a new Scooby-Doo edition. The way that Shaggy and Scooby actually ended up in the mountains is hilarious, but that ends up being the highlight of the humor for the longest time. It's got a little bit of self-aware humor here and there, and I think Scooby and Shaggy's antics aren't too annoying this time around, but it is stuck to being a generic Scooby-Doo formula that definitely makes a lot of it feel like it's going through the motions. Kinda like how I'm going through the motions right now. Overall, the movie itself is actually pretty okay, but at the same time, it's just kinda bleh. The only thing that I got out of this movie was actually no, I don't think I have anything this time, sorry.
We'll slap my face on $100 bill. What do we have here?
Here we are, guys, the first Ben 10 movie to be released, and I'm not really a fan of it. I think Ben 10 Secret of the Omnitrix does fall a bit flat as a Ben 10 movie overall. I don't think I consider it the worst, but there really wasn't much here for me. Ben's watch is self-destructing and he needs to venture through the galaxy in order to find Azimuth, the creator of the Omnitrix, and fix it before Vilgax can get his hands on it. And it's just like the show except longer. Just like a lot of these movies, I guess. I will say that the plot itself goes through places that I did find interesting. Like with them finding an intergalactic jail to find Azimuth, and the alien planet that they end up on, the allies and enemies that they end up meeting along the way. They're all pretty okay, all things considered, and they end up keeping the film engaging. They make pretty good foils to Ben, or just work in their own way, all things considered. But then there are a few problems. First, it's a movie where Ben can't really use his Omnitrix that much, and we don't get to see as much action as a Ben 10 movie would imply, and it ends up being pretty nice, but we don't get too much of it. Then we have the Gwen and Ben bickering that we always have to see with the first series. Like, I don't think anybody could stand this part of the OG show, and it is there for a good chunk of the movie, but aside from that, there are a few interesting scenes. Ben learning about sacrifice and being a true hero is interesting conceptually, and as it goes on, it's serviceable. Like, I wouldn't call it a groundbreaking revelation, but I thought it was a neat arc for this character to go through, in all honesty. And the way big introduction was also pretty neat, especially funny with how he ended up dealing with Vilgax. Overall, I do think it's a pretty neat movie that I'll never watch again, because I'm watching 4 of them for this marathon.
Do you know how many of you have died screaming Leroy Jenkins?
Level Up is the last live-action Cartoon Network movie. It's a movie about video games and gamers. Totally epic, bro. Totally aggro monsters from an MMO start appearing in the real world, and it's up to these MMO players to defeat them IRL before they get their world of normies greased by the evil villains. Okay, well, this was during the peak time of gamer lingo being that in most media, but bear with me for a second. From the outset, this movie seems cringy. Like, these nerds finally have a chance to be heroes because their one nerdy trait ends up being useful in a world where Leroy Jenkins is still the funniest thing ever. But surprisingly enough, there's a lot of unique aspects to it that I end up liking. Like, the fact that they end up realizing how different they are in the social hierarchy is kind of whatever. But learning about each of their struggles and the focus the movie puts onto them, I thought it was kind of nice. They each go through their own arcs, except the girl character, who's just a girl, but whatever. It really helps give a bit of depth to the characters that I honestly didn't expect. The expectations of being a star athlete, the struggles of being a problem child, and the limited scope that people have of nerds all end up working in this movie's favor. The fact that nobody else notices these monsters that show up, sure, one could see it as a problem, but I find it incredibly charming. Like in Ben 10 Race Against Time. It's just so cheesy that I kinda like it a bit. And the film does its best to use its admittedly not too great graphics to its advantage. The action itself is whatever. Some of the action scenes are kinda neat, while others are animated like Food Fight. The movie itself, while it is surprising in some places, it's also mostly kinda generic. And that leads to it being a 5 out of 10 experience overall. I mean, just look at the glowing things that I had to say. Not the best, but it's far from the worst. And then there's Eric Andre, baby! Like, I'm not even kidding with this. Eric Andre just shows up as the creator of the game in real life, and he's absolutely hilarious. He's regularly destroying anything expensive he can find, with so many stupidly specific rules, and the level of bratish energy that a spoiled rich kid would have, and he just elevates the entire experience to a fantastic level. Every time he's on screen, he just does the weirdest stuff. And it's just an amazing watch. Like, he's a 9 out of 10 character stuck in this 5 out of 10 movie. And overall, I think he does bring it up to a 6 out of 10. That's pretty rad.
Yo, Mandy, you ever have a bad time?
Underfist Halloween Bash is a Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy spin-off, where a bunch of side characters form a superhero team to defeat the evil marshmallow rabbit who wants to take revenge on trick-or-treaters, I guess. I don't know, man. This is the third Billy and Mandy movie I'm looking at, and I'm getting super tired. All your favorite side characters are here. From Erwin, the half-mummy, half-vampire who awakens his powers here, to Billy's son, to Fred Fredburger, to Scar for some reason. And Delgado, the king, the man, the myth, the legend! They got all of these guys together to do an admittedly alright action film that has the same charm of most of Billy and Mandy. Especially Delgado. What a Chad. Except, other than the funny scenario of it all, it makes you ask, what even is this movie? Like, there's a point where Mandy becomes the president, and another where they come up with a superhero name because they were in a conveniently fish-shaped vehicle that came from underground, and one of the team members started writing this name randomly on the walls. What? I feel like this is why I don't remember the show as fondly as stuff like the other cartoons. The fact that oversaturation of characters like Fred and the humor of Billy and Mandy end up grating after a while. Still, I wouldn't call this the worst Billy and Mandy movie ever, as Erwin does have an arc of sorts. A lot of the film, and especially the villain, is actually really funny. And seeing how he's actually messed with everyone there is kinda charming. I don't know. Whenever I think about this movie, I think about Buzz Lightyear's Star Command, which ends up setting the whole scenario a lot better there, but I'm not here to play the same game. Overall, it wasn't that bad of a movie all things considered. It had some fun action, neat comedy, and Delgado and Erwin actually had some pretty good chemistry, along with mostly everyone else. But I just couldn't care about it on any other level besides that, to be honest. Imagine if there was a beach with monsters. Monster Beach. Honestly, I don't know what I expected. I'd go over the plot, but I basically just said it right here. Two kids visit their uncle, one who happens to run Monster Beach. A beach where everyone was cursed into being a monster. Eventually, they learn to love it, and the kid has an arc about being more confident when it comes to surfing and yada yada yada. It's pretty bog standard stuff in all honesty, but there were a few things that I did like about it. The concept itself is so interesting, and they set up an interesting villain who could do so much to ruin Monster Beach. But then they just decide to abandon it for the sake of a rich CEO wanting to franchise his mega corporate surfing business, and yada yada yada. It's clear that they made it a backdoor TV pilot in that aspect, and I think that stuff kinda does suck. At least in that aspect, you do get to see a bunch of neat characters and a bunch of lovely interactions between them all. Things like seeing the girl enjoy racing around the island, or seeing the monsters try to help the boy learn how to surf. It's all really neat character building. They also decided for some reason to make this a musical, and while all the songs are adequate, the main Monster Beach song is actually kinda catchy.
Monster Beach.
We got some out-of-towners.
Monster Beach.
Mighty glad to found us.
Been a while since we've done our welcome speech to Monster Beach.
Oh!
I could totally see why people might come back to this movie with neat memories or just to have an okay time. It's got a lot of talent behind it, and it's a really unique one. Unfortunately, it doesn't really try hard enough to stand out in too many ways, other than the designs of the monsters. By the way, this girl was named Amphibia, and she has like 3 lines in the entire show. You're welcome.
Let's gather around the campfire and sing our campfire song.
Camp Lazlo is a show. It was definitely existing back in the day, and this sure is a movie based on it. I mean, at least this time I remember that this show exists, especially because Raj was the only Indian representation that I had as a kid. Still, I had my fun with the show, and I was looking forward to this one, and believe it or not, it was pretty decent. The plot is that there were two scouts who made a friend and Lazlo was his name-o, and then that trio went to camp and turned it upside down-o. At some point, Lazlo gets presumably eaten by a bear, and his two friends, Raj and Clam, are on a quest to find him, as Edward the Platypus takes credit for killing the bear. Honestly, as an origin story, there's a lot to like here. They make all the characters pretty charming, especially the main trio, and seeing them all come from different places but inevitably ending up in the same place is really neat, especially with their changes to the camp curriculum that Lazlo brings. Lazlo being so in tune with nature and helping the kids get out of their shells is really neat, especially alongside the posh Raj and the I make up my own rules Clam. Not to mention, it is kind of funny, like when the other two campers finally end up catching up with Lazlo. It's a pretty good joke. But other than that, it's not really that much of a grand adventure at the end of the day, and there's not really much to say otherwise. Some of the side characters are pretty neat, like the camp counselor and his assistant, but I do think that Edward gets on my nerves just a tad. It's just a nice episode of Camp Lazlo. Not too interesting, but it doesn't necessarily waste a lot of my time. It's just nice. And sometimes I can be in the mood for nice.
Hey, why is everything so bulgy?
Ben 10 Destroy All Aliens, the second Ben 10 animated movie, and one that takes place with the original series. Okay. Ben's Omnitrix is glitching out and everyone is in chaos, with Azimuth seemingly dying, and Azimuth's dad vowing revenge on Ben, wanting to destroy all aliens, that being Ben 10. In all honesty, story-wise, there's a lot of this which is similar to The Secret of the Omnitrix. Enemy fight turns into something wrong with the Omnitrix, and then the entire universe is in danger, and Ben has to go through this and that in order to fix it. But there are a few things I like here, more than the other movies. For one, I think the characters are better than the OG Ben 10. While I think that Alien Swarm had the better characterization of the two, I think this film does a pretty good job in that regard, and it definitely seems less annoying. Heck, the writing for both of these characters isn't that bad. But the real reason I like this Ben 10 story a lot more is that, in all honesty, the action in this one is pretty great. The other Ben 10 films definitely focused more so on character than it did action, but it led to most of the movies just being kinda boring. Not bad per se, but it just felt like a slog to get through them. In this one though, oh my god, there's so many interesting things they do. By bringing in all the aliens, having amazing fight scenes between one another, and even going inside the Omnitrix where you get these really rad visuals. At first I thought that the 3D style this took on would look stilted and awkward, but you gotta hand it to them. They did a fantastic job making engaging action with the characters in such an interesting way. The story itself is a bit harder to follow though. Everything that happens here just sort of feels incidental. Like compared to Secret of the Omnitrix, it feels like the movie is shifting from place to place without giving a lot to connect them. Comparing one to the other, it feels like the stakes are sort of toned down in this one, which probably has to do with the CG populating the city with, well, nobody. But honestly, it's not that bad. It does a good job with its mystery aspect, but it feels weird that a movie called Destroy All Aliens is based on a glitch in the Omnitrix like that. Plus, plot-wise, the mystery of what actually happened to Azimuth is the primary hook of it all. And while that thread isn't too engaging, funnily enough, the secrets of the Omnitrix are the one that make this one interesting. But it does end on a pretty good note, and I think it's just a fun movie overall. My first impressions of this film from the outside looking in was that it was a failed pilot made by the creator of Hey Arnold, so I wasn't really expecting much from it. But after taking a look at it, I was pleasantly surprised by Party Wagon. The whole deal with this show is that a bunch of people are venturing to the West Coast for a sense of adventure, for riches galore, for a fresh start, or for, well, anything. And as they follow behind a Christian missionary group, they get into some insane scenarios on a search for an old man's treasure, as this old man with a diamond for an eye tries to get back his treasure, and make sure that the Party Wagon bunch can't get the treasure back. Now, there's a lot of fun to be had. The characters are all distinct, and they each have their moments. And no matter how mundane you find them, all around they actually manage to have fun with it. There are characters to love here, like the man seeking adventure, to the rootin' tootin' cowgirl, yeehaw, to the one that quotes Shakespeare, to the guy with unmatched riz, to the cool guy. I feel like their whole arc with one another, being sort of mistrustful of each other but still sticking up for one another, is really charming. And while I may not remember their names, they all have such strong presences to who they are, are, and it's really swell to see this group of misfits banding together, getting into funny situations and lots of perils where they stick by one another. Speaking of, a lot of scenarios they get into are wildly entertaining to see, like when they get in a shootout over a drunken misunderstanding, when they get high, and when they end up actually finding the treasure. Things usually go off the wall and are increasingly entertaining. It's not only filled with these crazy off the wall moments, but a lot of low-key chill moments as well. They do have the occasional gathering around a campfire experience, or a day to just chill, and it really lets you know these characters a lot more. Whenever I see these scenes, it just reminds me of the Blue Shadow scenes from Three Amigos, and I think that's an accurate sentiment. It feels the same way that watching something like Over the Garden Wall or Summer Camp Island does, and it's a nice one to see. Honestly, speaking of Over the Garden Wall, this would have totally worked as one of the miniseries, given the way that the segments are paced, because yeah, while the pacing is fantastic, it definitely gives the feel of 10 episodes stitched together to make a movie. And while a lot of these movies have a similar problem, it gets pretty bad here, and I could see that being a turnoff for this movie, but I still say give it a shot. It is a smaller story at the end of the day, and admittedly it's also a bit predictable, but this was one of the surprises that I'm glad to have watched in this entire movie marathon, so that's pretty epic.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for
Good morning.
Morning to you.
Why are you gay?
Operation Interviews. This episode is the finale to Codename Kids Next Door, and that's really all the setup you need for this one, but it does involve a bit of spoilers. In a mission where the delightful children from down the lane have to set up a scavenger hunt for their birthday cake, the main crew is doing interviews, recalling this is their last time seeing Nigel Uno, their team leader. Yeah, that just sorta comes out of nowhere, doesn't it? The live-action versions of everyone was definitely a fun thing to see, and seeing them all act as grown-ups and interact with one another is swell, especially when you get glimpses into their future and seeing how much they evolved. Seeing stuff like number 3 taking after her mom, but running rainbow monkeys is really swell. Heck, the finale stuff is really neat too, being a relatively satisfying and lovely conclusion to the entire series. Getting to see some familiar faces and some new faces, as well as the end where they give a tearful goodbye. And that final line was just stellar. But there are problems. The first is that, in all honesty, this is just generic K&D stuff for the actual episode. If you took out the interviews and the final few minutes of animation, it would just be a regular episode. Not to say that it's bad, but it just kinda exists. It doesn't do anything to raise the stakes or make a fun adventure justifying itself as a movie. It's really just an episode. Speaking of, boy, if you think modern Western animated cartoons have rushed finales, the last few minutes cram so much about the lore, certain other members, and that tearful goodbye completely out of nowhere plot-wise. It's definitely a neat idea for sure, but overall it's just a whatever moment. If it wasn't interspersed with the actual interview bits, I don't think I'd expect any of this. Still, there is a lot of the same humor, action, and dialogue here that's familiar with the show, so I can't necessarily say it's a bad one. Also, the ship between two of the most shipped members getting deconfirmed and then reconfirmed was pretty funny. Next one. Okay, this is the last Ben 10 movie I'm talking about, and surprisingly, it's kinda the best. Are we sure we're not misplacing this? This isn't even based on the original show, or Alien Force. This is the 2016 show, the reboot that I think probably has fans, but I didn't think it had nearly enough to justify getting a movie in the first place. Oh well, let's get this over with. The plot is that there's something wrong with Ben's Omnitrix. Oh wow, really? Leading him to go to space where he gets put on trial. There, he gets punished for crimes that he didn't commit, and meets up with Asmus to help Ben fix his Omnitrix. Oh wow, really? Meanwhile, Vilgax is on Earth trying to find Kevin 11's knockoff Omnitrix so he can rule the galaxy. Look, in a lot of ways, this is just a rehash of Secret of the Omnitrix, though it does have a faster pace to all of it. A lot of the plot beats just seem like, the OG did this, so let's do this too. Like, it definitely rolled my eyes when we saw Asmith and Vilgax again, but it has been a few years since the OG show, and I can get introducing a new generation to these Ben 10 characters. And honestly, yeah, this part does do some things better. Seeing Gwen and Ben actually caring about one another like actual siblings is a definitive win. Like in every other version where they're kids, the writing is just so annoying and obnoxious, but here, it's clear that they care about one another, and it's sweet to see. Surprisingly enough, I think that the scenes with Asmus are actually pretty good as well. Probably the best in these movies. The one where it feels like Ben learns his lesson more naturally than the sudden turn of Secret of the Omnitrix. Not really that big of an impact compared to the trek to find him that the first movie had, but it didn't overstay its welcome. The Vilgax fight was actually pretty neat, especially seeing a whinier version of Kevin trying his best to save the day. Even Waybig coming back to defeat Vilgax was made so much more interesting, especially with his pseudo-Omnitrix thing, which somehow gives Vilgax the power of Alien X. At least I think that's what happens. I don't know the lore of this Ben 10 series. I guess some of the emotional heart and secret of the Omnitrix isn't here, but it makes up with it for some of the best action, only being beaten by Destroy All Aliens. Other than that, the humor is pretty okay, and so is the writing, adding up to an alright movie experience, but one that I don't really have much to say about. It's still a pretty solid experience though, and if you can stomach the art style and, well, the writing style, I'd say it's a pretty good one to check out as well.
When all else fails, sing and dance!
Now, when it came to the foreign films that I had to cover, from places like Cartoon Network India, or Cartoon Network Asia Pacific, there were a few that initially had my interest, but none more than Johnny Bravo Goes to Bollywood. Not only do I think that Johnny Bravo is a neat character, but I love myself some Indian representation. In that aspect, I think that the movie does deliver. Plus, it's the only one that uses a cartoon character in making their film, and I think that's pretty cool as well. Johnny Bravo, a washed-up celebrity superstar, decides to go to Bollywood to gain relevance. And that's just sorta it. The entire movie is just Johnny Bravo doing whatever he can in Bollywood, and I feel like this movie was made, in a lot of places, for me specifically. That's right, folks. Johnny Bravo Goes to Bollywood is for freezing climbers specifically. How do I describe the appeal of the humor? It's really, really good, but some of it has to do with knowing Indian culture. The same way you watch something like Nichijou or Lucky Star, and maybe you'll find some humor in some parts, but others will leave you scratching your head at either the culture shock or the dated references. Like, an example here is that someone's tongue catches on fire, so Johnny Bravo gets some lassi milk, but instead of getting lassi milk, he gets lassi milk. I'm sure someone out there burst out laughing, and I'm sure that someone was me. But on the other hand, they do reference things like Avatar, Ratatouille, and Twilight, to the point where it feels kinda lazy, but a good chunk of the jokes are just genuinely hilarious, and some jokes even had me screaming. The characters were pretty okay. Like, there's a bunch of weirdly pointless characters that they decide to throw in, and serve barely any purpose, but they each do have their times to shine, and are sometimes just entertaining throughout the movie. Like how Johnny randomly has a monkey butler, who you don't think is gonna do too much, until you get to the end and realize why he's there. And then there's a character like Jiggy, who has the same arrogance that Johnny Bravo has, but ends up being a really good foil to Johnny's shenanigans. He's a very weird, pretty blatant Johnny Recolor, but he's a fun Johnny Recolor. Like, I didn't expect to love him so much. I will randomly be in my house, just randomly going through my day, just blurting some of the lyrics from his iconic song. Speaking of, one thing that I didn't expect to love so much was the song list. Not every song is a banger, but I think it does a lot to show an authentic Bollywood experience. Not all the way, but a bit of the way through. The songs in this movie are like an actual Bollywood film in terms of their lyrics, the actual placement of these instruments, and the energy. Obviously, it's not perfect, and you could easily nitpick the heck out of everything here, especially since it's missing the snappy Johnny Bravo humor that made him such a hit in the first place. But if this is Johnny Bravo's last hurrah, I think it does a swell job. I mean, they got the original voice for Johnny Bravo in here, and they even referenced the Scooby-Doo crossover. That's how you know they did their homework.
We have water, milk, juice, spiders, Dr. Pepper. Spiders. Spiders it is then.
Now, this is what I'm talking about. Rather the Spider-Queen is such a good movie. This is absolutely the energy that I remember from the show, and I think that's all super cool. The plot here is that the Spider-Queen is finally rising to take over the world and marry Billy's son, that being a giant spider that Billy raised. And in doing so, she wants to eat Grimm's brain to gain his powers, which is a thing that can happen. Okay. I think something right off the bat is that I like how Billy, Mandy, and Grimm each have their own interesting subplots involving their characters. Grimm trying to explain the past with the Spider-Queen is actually kind of fun, and there's a lot to love about both of them going through all of this, from their banter with each other in the future, to seeing how Grimm changed in the very beginning. It's pretty clear that it becomes a misunderstanding plot, but it's still a lot of fun. Mandy and her bully teaming up to battle their way through the Spider-Queen's minions was also pretty engaging, and Billy talking to his son after dealing with separate milk gods was genuinely hilarious. It's crazy how much of an impact they ended up having, and it ends up both being really funny and really eerie, especially seeing how Billy and his son interact with each other. Speaking of really funny and really eerie, the atmosphere has definitely risen a notch since Big Boogie's adventure. Not by a ton, mind you, especially since the show is already fantastic with it, but it's definitely enhancing everything a lot more. Stuff like the introduction to the spiders and the whole spider taking over scene was pretty cool to see. My only complaint is that the resolution comes sort of fast, to the point where it kinda takes you out a bit, and admittedly, it is just a longer, better version of Billy and Mandy, but other than that, what an amazing ride all the way through. Definitely on the higher end with these movies.
The thing is, I really don't care.
Good Will Hunting is a really good name for this film. I mean, it's got a lot of wilt and a lot of hunting, and it's pretty good. And that's sort of where my thoughts begin and end on this one. It's a reunion with imaginary friends and their creators, and while everyone else's is there, Wilt's is not. As a result, Will decides to finish off some unfinished business with his old owner, and the film essentially follows his journey to get there, as well as the Foster's crew trying to catch up to him. The highlight of this film is definitely Wilt. Most of the movie is just him helping everyone out and learning about his backstory, about who he used to be and who his owner was. It's really nice seeing some history behind him and how he generally wants to help as many people as he can, as well as why he wants to do so. It's just a nice journey of a nice person doing nice things, and it's swell. Especially learning some stuff that you didn't think you needed to know. Things about Wilt's original owner and how he feels he let him down. And then his act of kindness evolving to more and more people helping him out and feeling thankful for his presence. Heck, the ending where you learn about Wilt's owner and how he grew up to think the world of Wilt and finding out that it wasn't even Wilt's fault and he was just blaming himself for something that someone else did. It's all just perfect. An amazing reflection of the type of character Wilt is. Everything else about the film though is kinda meh. It is kinda neat seeing the owner of Eduardo reuniting with him, and the people who discovered Coco, and they make such neat additions to the crew, especially Eduardo's creator. But other than that, they don't really do much with everyone else, and it's mainly just, is Wilt here? No, he was here. Rinse and repeat. Not to say that it's devoid of anything from those parts, as I feel that things like Eduardo's co-creator help show the use that imaginary friends can have for people growing up, and it ends up foreshadowing how much Wilt's owner appreciates him and stuff like that. But it doesn't feel like too much at the end of the day. Other than that though, the film is nice and charming enough. Not necessarily the peak of Foster's Home content, but still pretty good Foster's Home content regardless.
Do you remember that show, Symbionic Titan?
Craig of the Creek is a really great show. I think if you haven't seen anything about this show, please check it out. It's one of the most charming, heartfelt, relaxing shows that I've seen in a while. One where it feels like it invites kids and adults to explore this creek for a bit and get lost. And the movie continues that charm decently enough. But to be fair, the show is fantastic, leaving this one at an okay. Craig Williams is moving to Hercleton, a brand new neighborhood that he's very uncomfortable in. While trying to get used to his new surroundings, he finds out about a kid who discovered a wish maker, a device that can grant any wish you can give it. Unfortunately, an evil pirate captain is trying to find it for herself as well, so it's up to Craig to see if he can find the wishmaker and make his wish to get back home, with the help of Kelsey the mercenary and JP the former pirate. Right off the bat, this movie keeps some of the show's best elements. The relationship between all the characters is tighter than tight. Craig's mom and his family are here to support him in this difficult move, and it's something that feels like it's got the heart of the show. And while it does take a while, the charming start of the OG Craig gang is also really neat. From those aspects, it's pretty chill and feels surprisingly real for the show, even though we really could have had a bit more of each. It also has a bunch of stuff that's neat in terms of the sort of short creek lore bits that they have, things like the origin of the Wishmaker, and the whole crew that the pirate captain has, along with the introduction to the horse girls and the trading tree. It's all just neat as well. And then there's the parts where they let their imaginations run wild. One thing that took a while for me was the suspension of disbelief that they would have for a bunch of scenes that just happened throughout the show. But seeing them jump through others' wishes and having the sympathetic backstory of their captain revealed is all just really cool storytelling. Something I also like is the atmosphere of these shots. You can tell how empty Craig's room feels, how mystically new this creek is to him, and how it contrasts with the show, essentially highlighting Craig's confusion and fear with this new scenario. I can't say that all this movie is great. In fact, the one thing that I don't like about the show is that unlike Where's Lazlo or something like that, there's barely anything here that connects to anything else in the future. Maybe a few things here and there, but nothing too substantial. But stuff like that is fine in most circumstances. What really bugs me is that in a lot of its structure, while it thematically makes sense, we all know the conclusion of what happens in the story. While you can say that with basically any prequel, it's sort of weird here. There's not really any suspense, and you can feel that in basically all the scenes in the first half that take place in the creek. Maybe if it was something like a kid trying to get the Wishmaker and Craig having flashbacks to the first time he heard about it or something like that, then I'd probably appreciate it more. But I still think as a prequel to Craig of the Creek, it's still super good and captures the imagination that childhood just happens to have. It's got the heart, it's got the tone, it's got the style, but overall, it's just chill enough if you want to sit back and watch Craig of the Creek for a good time.
It's just like one of my Japanese animes.
I think my favorite thing about going through all these movies is finding these neat little surprises. Ones that you absolutely wouldn't really ever check out in any other circumstance. But when watching them, you'll find out that they're actually kinda neat for what they are. Exchange Student Zero fills that niche for me. The story, about anime characters from a card game being brought to life, sounds like your generic high school with supernatural elements, something like Level Up or Fire Breather on the offset, but I think they do a lot of interesting things with it. For starters, the real life people aren't animated too great, but the anime characters are animated pretty well. They have nice appealing designs, and while some of them might be a bit generic here and there, it does enough to contrast itself from the main people. The characters are a highlight too. Some of them stay entertaining throughout, like the Bully, Zero, and Discount Crocker over here. Other characters do start out as your typical tropes, but soon enough they evolve by giving them interesting scenarios to work with. Like where one of the kids falls in love with the Peach Girl only for her to be obsessive with him, and him not being able to deal with it. Or the relationship drama caused by the Warrior Queen wanting to marry the strongest warrior in the land. I think it's kind of fun, and that's the main thing I get from this. It's fun in so many aspects, and seeing them shove so many jokes and scenes that are either ironically funny or unironically enjoyable within the span of an hour and 10 minutes is really a sight to behold. You get to see them play with all the high school plot beats, and I think they do a good job with it. Granted, it's not all great. The pacing feels like it's around 6 stories mashed together for an hour and 10 minutes worth of content. And while it does take some getting used to, I can understand not really liking it all too much from that aspect. And while there is the overarching villain of Zero's fiancé who wants to take over the world, I think that's the one thing that ties everything together, and everything else is loosely based on that. Either way, it's still pretty entertaining. Though in some aspects it's a bit generic, but in all other aspects, I think it does what it sets up to do rather well. A really neat pilot, to the point where I got curious, and I actually wanted to watch the rest of the show, only to realize that the show wasn't actually too great. Sorry.
A big blue jay was making noise nearby.
Holy moly. On one hand, I know that regular show is peak, but on the other, I didn't expect the movie to be this good. In a future doomed by Mordecai and Rigby's crazy science teacher, they have to go back to the past and stop all of time from being destroyed. If that sounds absolutely insane to you, then you really don't know regular show. This movie has everything stellar about the show wrapped up into one insane package. I remember seeing how J.G. Quintel pitched The Power, and just how great of a storyteller he is, and that sort of thing translates well into this movie. Every single scene has something interesting, funny, charming, or downright cool to it, and it gets to the point where there's always something neat to see in this movie. When Mordecai and Rigby meet their past selves, and decide to pull the cool future stick on them, it feels incredible to see them be the cool ones this time around. The fact that they're time travelers just feels like if regular show was doing Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but with the regular show cast, at least for the downtime stuff. The action set pieces from the future are pretty neat as well. Seeing a side of Benson that actually trusts Rigby, compared to the present day relationship between them, seeing Muscle Man face off against his past self, and the Time NATO fight, they're all significant highlights. And then, there's that gigantic emotional moment. Rigby reading his rejection letter out loud is the highlight of this movie, and one of the most emotional moments to come from any of these movies. It stings. Seeing all of his co-workers reacting. Seeing future Mordecai come to a realization, while past Mordecai and past Rigby accept what happened. It's a scathing note, and while it does go through a bit of hyperbole, it's one that shares the same aggravation that many of us have when facing a rejection letter of any kind. It just burrows its way into your heart. That being said, the movie isn't without problems. A lot of scenes throughout the movie feel like they were rushed through, and while I think it would be fine for a 15-minute episode, for this hour-long movie, it ends up being a whole heap of confusion. Also, while seeing Father Time was pretty cool, I think the whole speech he had with Rigby, where all he needs to say is sorry, is a bit weird. Like, I could argue that he does feel sorry for what he did, and everyone could see it, but I think it's something that Rigby could have said at any time throughout their brief third act breakup. Him trying to justify it is more in character, but I feel like saying sorry would have been one of his first steps, rather than just not doing it. In any case though, it's still a really great movie, and if you like regular show, you're absolutely bound to like this movie. I grew up in a weird period as a kid watching Cartoon Network. It was right around the tail end of the cartoons era that I was watching some of these shows. And as a result, two shows that were dreadful to even hear about were Billy and Mandy in Foster's Home. Not that they're bad, far from it, but the constant cheese and Fredburger advertising was absolutely annoying, and it definitely soured my feelings on both of those shows. But with this marathon, I was reminded at how strong of a start Foster's Home had. They established the basic premise here, that being this world full of imaginary friends is home to Mac and his imaginary friend, Blue. While they cause chaos, his mom wants them to separate, and so Blue finds an advertisement for Foster's home for imaginary friends, and wants to go there. Unfortunately, he doesn't realize that it's a place for people to adopt imaginary friends, and so Blue must find a way to avoid being adopted while Mac tries to help. I sorta like the idea of having this one as the pilot movie, as the conflict is extreme enough to work with the characters here, and it showcases both Blue and Mac's personalities and lives. Sure, a lot of it felt loosely connected, but I think it sets up everything, from Blue and Mac's relationship, to the antagonism of his big brother, to the peril of trying to survive in the home without being adopted by a psychotic little girl who wants to rename him Tiffany. Oh, I get it. Speaking of the characters, a lot of them have awesome moments to shine. From the fellow imaginary friends like Eduardo, Wilt, and Coco, to the other supporting characters like Madam Foster, Mac's brother, and Mr. Harriman. They're all a lot of fun and are extremely unique. Heck, while they all have highlights, even Mac's mom has a really touching scene when she talks to Mac about keeping Blue, and how she doesn't want him in the house. Mac taking it maturely, and Blue taking it immaturely, ends up showing more of the dynamic, and it's a scene that I was definitely shocked to see on rewatch. The art of it sure is something, as it's probably the most memorable part of the show and the movie. It's got a bunch of fun design quirks for the humans and imaginary friends alike, and it really seems like they went as far as they could when coming up with imaginary friends. It really feels like you couldn't tell this sort of premise or story without this sort of animation style. And finally, it's just a really funny movie to watch. Like, not necessarily busting my gut at every single line, but to the point where you can understand the appeal of this show. Heck, it even made Blue tolerable, and considering the entire series, that's pretty okay. Even if you never watched the show, give it a try. It just might surprise you with its wit, charm, and creativity.
When it comes to like going to Japan, for instance,
Going to Japan is not a normal incident.
Teen Titans was, of course, an incredible series. It was funny, action-packed, filled with great messages and great characters. It was fantastic in so many ways. One might even consider it peak. I definitely consider it peak. And so, I was excited to rewatch this movie for this marathon, and it's pretty good. The plot this time around is that a mysterious fighter comes to Jump City under the order of Brush Shogun to get help/attack the Teen Titans. As a result, the Teen Titans decide to pack their bags and fly to Tokyo to explore the city and stop them once and for all. But tossing all that plot aside, there's a bunch of stuff that I can gush over immediately. First, it has a lot of great interactions with all the Teen Titans. Raven doesn't get to do much, but she definitely has parts of the movie where she gets some jokes out. Cyborg with his all-you-can-eat challenge is really fun to watch. Starfire and Robin doing relationship stuff around Tokyo and overall just hanging out is kinda cute to see. Seeing Beast Boy as this huge otaku and sipping over this one girl is pretty funny, especially when he sings the poorly translated Teen Titans theme. Heck, speaking of that, all the references to so much of Japan was really fun to see. If you look around, you could find them anywhere and everywhere, and it's pretty neat to see them wear their inspiration on their sleeves. I think dramatically, there's a few great scenes that you could point out, and it's definitely the major draw of this one. Starfire kissing the random Japanese dude to learn Japanese was the one that broke me as a kid, but I'm glad that it sets up the potential conflict. Then there's the scene when Robin is covered in what he presumes to be blood, with the Japanese public, and even himself, thinking that he killed a man. Honestly, it's a moment that shocked me in the sense that they actually went there to make Robin think that he betrayed the one rule that the Bat family had, even if it was a trick. It was definitely a point of drama. Not to mention the entire arc where he becomes a lone wolf and becomes a vigilante for his own justice. Also really cool. This show really does help you realize how cool OG Robin truly is. And he ends up working with his friends substantially well. Is there anything that drags this movie down? Sorta? The final fight was just kinda whatever, and heck, the entire twist of Brush Shogun is alright. I don't think it was spectacular, nor did it leave too big of an impact, but it was fine enough. And while the pacing is consistent in a lot of places, in others, it feels like they could have done more with what they had. It's definitely not the best that Teen Titans has to offer, especially with how many banger episodes there are, but I think it's definitely in the middle somewhere. Either way, I still think this is a fantastic movie, and one that does the show an adequate amount of justice.
Fly, 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 fly. Pow, bye, 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 bye.
The Powerpuff Girls movie is a movie that left a lot of people mixed. I am definitely one of them. That's not to say that I didn't like watching it. In fact, there were a lot of parts that I did really like, but there were a few annoyances that I had. The story is that, well, you already know the theme song.
Professor Utonium completes the experiment of a lifetime combining sugar, spice, and everything nice, and a pinch of chemical X to create 3 superpowered little girls.
In this origin story, the professor has to learn how to deal with 3 new superpowered children, and the girls have to learn about the responsibilities that come with their great power. And I think here, I can actually start my real criticism. I think the girls themselves have a bit of a weird characterization. One where they're both responsible enough to know that they have to keep people safe, yet reckless enough to destroy a whole city while playing tag. But they do have lovely moments to shine, which I will get to later. I don't know, the heart feels like it's all over the place with the girls, but while it is contrived, it does make sense. Like they were, quite literally, born yesterday, and I can give them some leeway when it comes to their naive natures, especially in the second half of the movie, but sometimes they do push things too far. I think the professor, while I don't think he's a perfect counterpart to the show, does a fantastic job throughout the movie, being this misguided father figure who just wants to do what's best for these superpowered girls that have just showed up in his life. And Mojo Jojo is the sympathetic yet conniving villain who takes advantage of the naivete of the girls, does a really good job, as unsettled as he is throughout the film. In fact, his scenes with the girls were some of my favorites. The animation is as snappy as before, but the film does take some time to show off its more impressive budget and scale, which ties into the two scenes that I think caused me to have these mixed feelings about this movie overall. The scene where they play tag is really well made from an action standpoint. It has so many great moments and so much impressive animation compared to the original show, but from a story standpoint, it took ages to actually resolve. And while it is an impressive animation spectacle, you see this in contrast to the ending where they discuss their responsibilities, and it just feels like that characterization problem I was talking about. Like, do they not realize that breaking things that don't belong to you is bad and that's the reason why people don't like your powers? Are they stupid? Well, obviously yes, they were born a few days ago, but it's still something not conveyed too well in this part specifically. Speaking of that ending though, holy moly, that ending was fantastic. Mojo getting his monkey army ready to take over the world, Mojo's iconic villain speech, all the hilarious monkey introductions, the girls caring so much about the professor that they rush in to save him, the girls using their powers to save the day after learning how to control them, Mojo going King Kong, the entire city banding to tell the girls how helpful their powers are. It's all so great. And the action is as intense as it was through the tag scene, along with showing the charm of these characters. It's a perfect climax in so many ways. It's something where if you wanted to watch the entire movie to get to this scene, I'd believe it. Heck, I'd believe it for basically everything in the second half. But for me, I could definitely see a lot of problems with it, but it does so much more to make up for the stuff that it doesn't do too well. It's got heart, crazy animation, and one really good time, depending on where you look.
Granddad!
I was never into action cartoons as a kid, mainly because I never had my own TV. But by the time I actually got into them, I was focused more so on shows like Avatar and Teen Titans, meaning that Codename Kids Next Door passed by my radar for so many years, though I do remember watching episodes. Not to mention, as a kid, I really couldn't suspend my disbelief enough to enjoy the entire show. I mean, surely kids don't hate every adult. I liked my elementary school teachers back in the day, they were pretty cool. But now, in my current state, I can see the show for what it is. An incredibly stellar, action-packed, fun show with charming characters, concepts, and writing almost everywhere, which all gets exemplified in Operation Zero. The main villain, Father, coordinates an attack on the kids next door and uses their technology to revive Grandfather, a man who once forced kids into labor camps to make tapioca pudding, who was stopped by the mysterious Agent Zero. After this failure of letting Father and Grandfather win, Nigel Uno, aka Number 1, tracks down Agent Zero, and works with him to save the world from Grandfather's control, only to find out that Zero was his father all along. I think one of the things I like the most about this movie is that they make sure to put things on such a grand scale, with all the villains coming together, and so much K&D lore being revealed, and so many twists and turns in so many ways. It really makes the film feel like it really is such a big event to have this movie come out, and that's something I can appreciate for sure. Just the true identities of Number Zero and Father alone were fantastic enough, and heck, the delightful kids end up making it such an intense reveal, and it really made the whole thing feel like a spectacular movie event. It's also a roller coaster of emotions. It can be really funny sometimes while being legitimately terrifying and intense in others, and a lot of that comes down to easily the best part of this movie, the relationship between Number 1 and Number 0. I think they make a great duo, as they both care about the K&D so much, but to the point where Number 1 learns from Number 0 with the power of teamwork and proper planning. The ending scene where Number 1 tries to talk with Number 0 again, only for a message to come in with some final words, there's nothing better. But most focus is unfortunately on them, to the point where most of the other stuff feels kinda absent. Not that it's bad. I especially love the tension between numbers 5 through 2 trying not to turn old, and racing desperately to make an invention that could fix it. But the main thing that I ended up going back to and thinking about was numbers 1 and 0. Not to mention having Father not do anything in the second half was really wasted potential. Having the bad guy and the good guy team up to fight an even greater bad guy was always a trope that drills into the very core of my planet-sized action love. But they really only penetrated the crust with this one. But other than that, I still think that this movie rocks my socks off.
Oh no! Is that you?
Is he here?
As a show, We Bare Bears has always been one to be chill. I wouldn't say they were overly exciting like a lot of the 2010s Cartoon Network lineup, but they were always there, being themselves. A simple show that goes into hilarious circumstances and heartfelt moments, but still staying in the sidelines for this or that reason. So I was kinda shocked to learn that there was a movie, until I realized how popular the show was overseas. In any case, Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear are taking to court over how many disturbances they've made to the general public, and after a particularly egregious error on their ends, they need to travel to Canada for immunity, while avoiding Murphy, a man obsessed with bringing them back where they came from. I love how much it references the show, but only in the first bit, to the point where you can get why this and that character are doing what they're doing, but not letting them take up too much time, so they can enjoy this pretty neat road trip of a movie. For the beginning and the middle, I wouldn't say it's spectacular. It surely pales in contrast to another road trip Cartoon Network movie, but you still get the same characterization that you'd expect from the bears, and a lot of charming scenes with them. When you compare it to other films, I think this one shows a great deal about how Grizz does try to do what's best, or what can help his friends the most, but doesn't have the actual foresight to think things through too much. But then you get to see his backstory, and you realize that he's lived his life like that, because the hardest decision of his life was already made for him, and he never looked back since. This movie has a somewhat predictable fixation with memes, like the scene in the beginning where they're trying to make the most viral video ever. It puts Mitchell's vs. the Machines to shame with how much they use. The same with the meme animal rave in the middle of the desert, though it's crazy that nobody recognized them from that viral video that they sent to everyone. And then there's the predictable chase scenes, the predictable third act breakup, and then it hits you at the heart of the film. Like I said, deceptively simple. Not only do we get to see the brotherly connection between Grizz, Panda, and Ice Bear, especially as we see their full backstory, but then you hear Murphy's speech about trapping them in an enclosed location away from the public, because they're just animals that don't deserve to be with humans, and everything about the movie makes sense. In this world of sentient talking animals, the bears never really had to justify their existence to each other, but it seems like their entire goal is to do that with the public. That's why it does feel tragic when the three bears are being sent to camps far away from one another, just because of the species they were born. And despite them being animals, you feel as if this entire thing is inhumane, and the emotional core of the movie sort of pops out at you from that. Even the animal meme rave scene that I thought was purposeless, other than just being a silly distraction, ends up justifying itself, ensuring that they're only able to have the status and not be questioned because of their general popularity. It's completely understandable as to how they end up sticking up for one another given their statuses, and it just connects everything together and wraps it up into a neat little package. Bottom line, I wouldn't say this film is a masterpiece, but it is a thrilling, emotional, surprising tale that ends up being some of the best Cartoon Network has to offer.
Seriously? The talking dog is the weird thing about all this?
I definitely had mixed expectations for Scooby-Doo Straight Outta Nowhere. A Scooby-Doo film with a guest star? Whoa! It seems like the most predictable way that any Scooby-Doo anything would get any sort of interest. But on the other hand, it's a crossover with Courage, one of the OG great cartoons. The one crossover that makes the most sense out of anything Scooby-Doo can do. Will it be faithful to the source material? Probably, but I didn't really care about that. I more so care about having a good time. If it gets too distracting like Teen Titans Go vs Teen Titans, then I'd be annoyed. But there is no way this would be on that same quality. Right? Well, yeah. Straight Outta Nowhere was a surprising film that I was happy to watch. The plot is, what else? Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Gang end up meeting Courage, the cowardly dog, who lives in the middle of nowhere. But creepy stuff happens in nowhere. It's up to Courage to save the town! One thing I surprisingly have to compliment is the wit from the Scooby-Doo side. Like, not only are there a lot of subversions here and there, but they end up being surprisingly really funny, though they are kind of expected. Every scene with this clown that they catch in the beginning is a highlight, and the gang has some really good writing to go with them. Speaking of, everyone has fantastic writing, more so than the other Scooby films. The fact that they made Eustace tolerable, and had Muriel as her standard charming self after so long was a breath of fresh air. The scenes where she's doing riddles with Velma are just so charming, and so is Scooby and Shaggy hanging out with Courage. Courage as well, having an arc about, well, having courage. was a really sweet thing to see. With mostly everything else other than the humor though, it ends up being something where you're both stunned at the creative decisions, yet you're all for it. Like having courage snacks instead of Scooby snacks, having the main bad guys be cats and quack for basically no reason, having a magic meteor that explains literally everything about nowhere, and useless bags having a rap song, all these things are stupid, but they're so engaging and interesting to explore. I'm not gonna lie, some of these things do irk me, but come on, Eustace raps. The middle is definitely predictable Scooby-Doo fare for sure, but it still has a lot of cool things here and there, like the car chase, and the trek through the mansion being relatively enjoyable. Even with all of that aside, this is such an amazing film to watch. If you're a diehard fan of either of these shows, it might not be the one for you because it is so off the wall that it doesn't really stick with either part too well. Especially the mystery, which isn't one of their better ones. But if you're like me and have been itching for some fun Scooby-Doo antics or some charming courage antics, this might be the one for you. Check it out yourselves and get to nowhere fast.
He's gonna take you back to the past.
Oh my god guys, Samurai Jack is such a fantastic series. While shows like Powerpuff Girls sort of shown in the spotlight more, there's something so low-key interesting about a relatively more grounded, almost epic-like saga of Samurai Jack. The tale of a lone samurai fighting against the shape-shifting demon Aku, ending in him being sent to a doomed future. It's one that's full of action, enjoyment, danger, and emotion, and the premiere movie makes a damn strong case for it. We get to see Jack's past, how he gains various talents, and his drive for doing so. It's actually really interesting and nice. It's the perfect introduction to the character in the show. The second part of this, while it is weirdly paced at the beginning, it still has a lot of neat action and a lot of funny conflicts here and there, especially with the introduction of these silly dogs. While the final episode was essentially just fighting Aku's minions, it was still a good conclusion to one of the strongest first episodes of a show that I've ever seen. After going through everything that he has, Jack is such an interesting character through all of this, from his unwavering determination to do what's right, his unflinching assistance to those who really need it, even a bit of his general take things as they come nature, is all something that's incredibly entertaining. The main villain Aku is a pretty entertaining villain with all his mannerisms. There's a wonder that even now he's recognized as one of the greats. Even the little dogs that ask for Jack's help are all fun in their own ways. The entire premiere movie ends up making the strongest case possible for the show, and it's definitely one that I'm happy to have seen for myself. My only problem is that the first part is definitely the strongest. The second and third episodes are both neat, but compared to the relatively cool first part, it can't keep up nearly as much, even if they are good in their own rights. But other than that, there's not much else to say. Samurai Jack is one of the best cartoons out there, and the premiere movie is a list of 3 of the best episodes of the show. It's literally the peak of peaks.
It would be so awesome. It would be so cool.
Teen Titans Go to the Movies is the first of 4 movies that I consider unbeatable when it comes to their quality, in the sense where there are flaws in all of them, but they're still the best of the best on this list, and if I ever decide to redo this, I'll happily watch through these first. That being said, this is a movie that I think everyone was surprised by. Well, everyone knew the show's popularity, for better or worse. I think expectations for this movie were cautiously optimistic, and it ended up paying off. As one of the most entertaining films in the catalog, Robin, of the Teen Titans, feels like he's not respected enough to be in a movie, and so he tries to find a way to prove his worth after defeating a new arrival, Slade. Now, of course, this film does have the positives that you'd expect. The animation definitely jumped up in budget, it has a better narrative structure than most of the episodes of the actual show, and overall the scale of it is a lot bigger. But surprisingly, there's a lot of really good action, and it's all engaging. From the fight with the Balloon Man, to the reoccurring fights with Slade, it isn't just creative and fun, it's downright stunning in some places. The humor is, well, it's full of hits in all honesty. While your mileage may vary on some of the jokes, there's so many highlights that I think everyone knows at this point. Not all of them hit as hard as expected, in fact there are a few groaners, but the ones that do hit a solid double when it comes to their comedy. I think we all knew where we were when Robin pushed Batman's parents into crime alley, or when Batman and Superman fought over their fathers' names. Then there's Slade, voiced by Will Arnett. He's the perfect villain for this movie. A villain that's a cunning, evil mastermind that manages to catch up with the humor expected in this show. If the Teen Titans are seen as jokesters who are bad heroes, then finding a rival in this character who ends up being a jokester and a good villain is a surprising one. It connects with Robin's emotional through line, which is surprisingly the main focus of the movie, and it's not too bad. They actually have a lot of dramatic weight when it comes to delivering their lines, and it is kind of surprising. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? Of course there is! The songs are actually surprisingly neat. While not every song is amazing, most of them are super fun. My Superhero Movie is a great I Want song, the upbeat inspirational song about life is super nice, and the Teen Titans Go rap is phenomenal. It's hilarious to me that this song is used as the Chekhov's gun, and one that shows both how pathetic they are in the beginning and how powerful they are in the end, with it all culminating in a really stunning final fight that's just so much fun to watch from an action and a musical perspective. In a word, this movie is fantastic. Not all of it lands. I think some of the emotional moments are kind of predictable, but I think a vast majority of it, being such a great experience, lets it keep its status as one of the best. You know, except for the stupid Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans trailer. Remember that nonsense? What a scumbag move.
Time to play! No, time to die!
Oh my god. Destination Imagination ended up being the biggest surprise in this entire ranking, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, I really do need to stress how awesome this film is. I knew that Foster's Home was good, but I didn't realize it was this good. The plot is that Frankie feels overworked and is taken advantage of by Harriman, and when a new imaginary friend gets brought in, being able to do anything within a gigantic toy box, Frankie decides to stay in there, and the gang has to try and save her, if she even wants to be saved. Let's start out with the biggest standout of this entire film, the villain. World is probably the second best character to ever be introduced to any of these movies, and it's absolutely warranted. He's a very entertaining character, but he's also really tragic. Nobody even wanted to mention that he existed, and kept talking about him in hushed whispers. Heck, he arrives in a locked treasure chest that the Foster's crew was directed to never open. And then it becomes warranted when he ends up controlling an entire world all to his whim, being able to change anything and everything he can slap his face onto, and leading them to some terrifying scenarios. But at the end of it all, he's just an imaginary friend who wants to play with someone. His attitude is very much like the Collector from the Owl House, with the immense powers of Bill Cipher, yet the attitude of a child. He's the perfect kind of villain for this sort of story, as well as a justified foil for Frankie. Frankie's part in all of this, as an underappreciated helper of a gigantic house, who only wants a break and some respect, is something we've seen time and time again. But this movie goes further into analyzing it. Then there's the actual adventure that the Foster's gang goes through to try and save her. It's all so well done. The movie actually has a lot of fun and intense action scenes as they fight for their lives, and I think it's a lot of fun to watch. Along with that, the movie actually does a lot of clever foreshadowing that I honestly really liked seeing in so many places, especially to the Foster's gang. Even the scenes outside the adventure, like the ones with Harriman trying to pick up Frankie's slack and being a jerk, was surprisingly enjoyable. Only one thing about it though, that being that Frankie is the one that ends up solving all the problems in the end. It makes sense for dealing with World for the first time, but Frankie ends up saving everyone while Harriman doesn't really do much except get humbled. It's an okay conclusion for sure, but they really do make Harriman so insufferable throughout this entire movie. Like, I get it, he's the bad guy of this movie, and he does get punished somewhat, but him getting mad at Frankie after he was the one who messed everything up is just a bit infuriating. But it's really the only downside to this movie. While one might say that this doesn't look like that much of a visual improvement compared to some other films like the Powerpuff Girls movie, except in some of those amazing imagination sequences, I think that the actual story, the characters, the suspense, it all makes this movie soar into being one of the best that I've seen from any cartoon movie, and honestly, I can't recommend this one enough. On one hand, I think many of you expected this to rank high. I mean, it's a Steven Universe thing, and I'm the Steven Universe defender, or whatever you want to call me. But on the other hand, I've never really talked about the movie at any length in any of my videos. I usually expound more on the original show, and even Future to an extent, but never really this movie. So I guess I'll get into what this movie has to offer. Steven Universe, after spending 2 years freeing the galaxy from the reign of the diamonds, tries to relax with everyone on Earth, until a mysterious gem known as Spinel activates a bioweapon set to destroy the Earth in 48 hours, and mind wipes the experiences that the crystal gems have had. Now it's up to Steven to restore their memories and save Earth from Spinel's weapon. Now, this movie isn't perfect. Let's get this right out of the way. There's a lot of stretches where nothing really happens that's interesting or exciting. They usually last a few minutes, so they aren't too egregious, but they still make the movie suffer a lot, especially in the middle. Then there's the overall narrative not being too surprising. A lot of it is just Steven suffering after 2 years of dealing with the diamonds, and trying to save everyone but having him be useless, causing more suffering. It's definitely a rough watch in these aspects, and generally basic, especially for Steven Universe. And I could see someone ranking this movie alongside We Bare Bears or Regular Show the movie. And yet, within those flaws lies a film that's incredibly ambitious from every other angle. A movie that's unabashedly Steven Universe in everything that it does. Its dialogue and writing can be really witty and funny when it comes to jokes and plot points. The visual jokes end up getting a lot of laughs, and a lot of it is really funny, for the brief respites of comedy that you can find here, because the threat is definitely something weighing on Steven's mind, while trying to help everyone. Speaking of, while I gave the impression of Steven being miserable in this, I'd like to correct that, and more so say that Steven's dealing with a lot. It leads to an interesting dive of his character between the OG show and future, one where he's incredibly optimistic while still panicking and worrying about the world, and trying to save it as soon as he can for the sake of his own well-being, and the well-being of everyone else. A midpoint between the rise and the fall of the chosen hero. It's interesting, and it does hark back to the best of the show, places like I Am My Mom or The Return. Then there's the songs. Oh my god, the songs. Even if narratively some of them are better than others, there are so many unbelievable bangers, from the harmony of Let Us Adore You, to the swing of Other Friends, the lovely summary of Happily Ever After, the rock of Independent Together, the chilled vibes of True Kinda Love, the finality of Change, the fun tune of No Matter What, the inspirational vibe of Who We Are, the gentle nature of Isn't It Love, the humorous System Boot 3 Pearl, whatever, this one. They all have something fun, or charming, or emotionally charged, or just plain lovely to listen to, along with tying it to the plot, and it makes it a fun listen for sure. Some of these songs are just masterpieces that show the strength of making a Steven Universe story an unabashed musical. I love how the movie takes the time to focus on the journeys of the three crystal gems, and what the actual connecting piece is for them, how it gets foreshadowed in Happily Ever After, and how it gets expanded in several aspects by the time they go back to who they were. And of course, we can't forget the highlight of the movie, Spinell. Literally everything having to do with her makes the movie so much better. From the crazy rubber hose style she's animated in, from the complicated turmoil of her past and her relationship with Steven. She's someone who's a people pleaser who couldn't please the one person she needed to. And that led to her abandonment issues, and her insecurities. Ones where she feels like she's not good enough for friendship, and believing that she's too far gone for any sort of meaningful change, yet still feeling conflicted on who she wants to be. Her pairing with Steven is one that acts as a perfect foil, like in the scenes where Steven has to be okay with Spinell after she had her memory wiped, or the scenes where Spinell gets suspicious of Steven's intentions. She's not only a really fun villain, but an emotionally interesting one. Not to mention, her lines are really interesting. Like her line at the end, "Whenever you change for the better, but whenever I change for the worst!" That line is some of the best for any show, and seeing her breakdown at the end kills me. I mentioned how the swing of Other Friends is really neat, and everyone loves how spiteful and bombastic it is, but I actually think the song, and the scene that makes me love this movie more than so many others, is with Drift Away. It's such a touching and depressing song, in which we learn how Pink Diamond forcing her to stay still, as Spinell's loyalty end up combining to traumatize Spinell through her abandonment. It's a fantastic scene, it's such a somber song, and hearing Spinell's voice actor break by the end is just, it's always something that breaks me to my core. And the ending where she realizes that she is worthy of love and change is incredible. This is why I love this movie. It does have flaws for sure, and you could argue that maybe Samurai Jack or Destination Imagination is better when it comes to an overall viewing experience. But I think this movie has the strongest elements of both a Steven Universe movie and a Cartoon Network movie. The same type of quality found in a bunch of Cartoon Network movies, but amplifying the best elements of them. From the showmanship and heart of the Powerpuff Girls movie, to the attention to character of the regular show movie or We Bare Bears, to the surprisingly interesting new villain, and a deep dive into a well-established character, like with Destination Imagination, to being a true showcase of what the show has to offer, like with Samurai Jack the premiere movie. I guess it's a question of if you'd rather have a pizza that's full of your favorite toppings, or a loaded double bacon cheeseburger, with a bit of toppings that you don't actually care for, but with more meat overall. Most people would just take the pizza that's good overall, and that's a fair choice, but I do prefer the meatier option. Even if there is stuff that I don't like for sure. Plus, it'll probably come with a side of fries. What are the side of fries in this metaphor? I don't know, the songs I guess. It's a film that's definitely a lot, but it's a lot to love.
In case of movie break glass.
Bingo!
I love Ed, Edd and Eddy. This show is absolutely my favorite cartoon, and I love it so dearly. While shows like Steven Universe, Craig of the Creek, Adventure Time, Gumball, and heck, most of the 2010s output end up being generally more interesting shows, Ed, Edd and Eddy is always a show that I can watch casually and appreciate to no end. It's just really funny, and weird, but mostly funny. As for the movie, come on. I think even those of you who didn't know much about the channel knew about this movie, because it truly is that great. Ed, Edd n Eddy's Big Picture Show isn't just a good cartoon movie, it's one of the best, rivaling that of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie or Across the Second Dimension. You might expect a story where the Eds go too far in one of their scams, and must escape to find Eddy's brother to be a good enough story for a 30-minute special by itself, but they pull out all the stops here, making this the definitive Cartoon Network movie. I think it's easier to list things I don't like about it first, that being that Johnny, while funny, does practically nothing, and Naz and Kevin's whole relationship joke gets played out, and that's it. And even then, they're still pretty funny in all honesty. They do so much to make the atmosphere as intense as they can. Even if you can't really see much of an upgrade from the show, seeing all these brand new locations ends up with a pretty visually compelling experience. Heck, seeing these places sometimes from so many different angles gives you that energy, from the amazing, suspenseful timing for both its serious moments and its comedic moments, including that amazing, liminally suspenseful and intense opening. The one where you see all the Eds panicking and reacting to their worst scheme gone wrong in their own ways, to the interesting change in regular landscape that's pretty neat overall, to the side characters having some amazing moments and unexpected team-ups, to its general comedy being peak for the entire show. Things like the "in case of movie break glass" joke, to the sextant joke, to Rolf's weird egg cooking hunter skills. There's so many great moments, and even a lot of unexpected moments that end up being really good in relation to the show, both in terms of comedy, and especially in terms of suspense. We all know that one scene, where Double D finally snaps. Something that feels like it's been building up higher and higher for 6 seasons. More so than something like Panda and We Bare Bears or Mordecai and Regular Show. Eddy put Double D in the worst possible scenario, and it's finally that which is able to pull something out from Eddy that isn't some form of bravado or denial. We finally get to see him vulnerable, which makes the ending with Eddy's brother hit even harder. He finally makes it to him, and you just see how much Eddy respects him, the same type of respect that he wants from his peers but never gets. And it's clear that the respect that he wants is something that his brother takes advantage of to con and abuse Eddy repeatedly. And even with just a sample of the pain that Eddy's brother has put Eddy through, he still looks up to him. It puts into context everything in the show. How he wants so badly to be friends with the other kids, and believes that he could do so with the same scams and behavior that his brother inflicted on the neighborhood in the past. But only by moving past them could he finally take the first steps to be accepted by his peers. This movie takes everything that we know about these characters, what we've taken for granted about their behaviors, and reframes them in such a powerful way, one that fully encompasses Eddy's character arc throughout the movie. But while that moment is a standout, everything else about this movie is done to make the audience engaged and entertained, and it succeeds tenfold by being the best Cartoon Network movie ever, through its fantastic humor, interesting additions, and its hidden heart. But we just don't talk about the cankers in that final scene. We just don't. So, where are we now? Well, Cartoon Network is, it's all but dead. Warner Bros. Has gone through so many terrible business decisions ever since the Discovery merger, especially in regards to their animation, canceling shows that barely get a head start left and right, getting rid of them from HBO Max, their streaming service, Cartoon Network being consolidated into the blob of Warner Bros. Animation. It's easy to say that there's no Cartoon Network anymore. Looking at the Cartoon Network movies that are going to come out, Gumball is in the hands of Hanna-Barbera Europe and Hulu, while Adventure Time, more specifically Fiona and Cake, are in the hands of HBO Max. They don't really have a Cartoon Network to air on, but as they say, time keeps moving forward. Sometimes that's all you can do. Just get up and accept that time marches forward whether you want to or not. But not all is lost. There are still people, lots of people, inspired by so much of Cartoon Network's lineup that they incorporated into their own works as inspiration. And a lot of the talent from Cartoon Network are still working on projects under the Warner Bros. Animation studio, and even beyond. So while it is basically gone, it's not really over. Overall though, this was a fun look back. It was neat seeing how a lot of shows handled their movie experience, where they aired on TV, or even got the chance to head onto the big screen. It was neat seeing so many newer experiments in the middle of all shapes and sizes, and a lot of these revisits were a lot of fun to go through. It definitely made me feel nostalgic for all these shows, even if some of them aren't that old. As someone who's been dealing with a lot of bad stuff recently, talking about these films and reanalyzing my thoughts on them was actually pretty neat. I hope that you all liked the video, and I'll see you all next time. Take care!